All right, so buckle up, everybody, because
Mm.
we are diving deep into 2024. It's been, well, let's just say it's been a year, right?
It really has.
And we're going to unpack it all, make sense of it all, from political dramas to AI taking over the world. Well, maybe not quite taking over.
Not yet, at least.
Exactly, not yet. But seriously, we're going deep on everything that's happened this year. It's a lot to cover, but by the end of this, you'll be breezing through any water cooler talk. Think of us as your cheat sheet to sounding incredibly smart.
I like that.
Right. So we're cracking open a juicy report today called The Year in Review, a look at 2024's key events across the globe. And trust me, there are some real surprises in here.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, did you know an AI almost won a Nobel Prize this year?
It's true. And wait till we get to what Elon Musk is up to now. Let's just say he's still got that Mars fever.
Always.
Always. But first, let's talk U.S. elections. This year's been like a political thriller novel, wouldn't you say?
It's been nonstop, that's for sure. Trump versus DeSantis, Biden's facing a whole other set of challenges. It's been a wild ride. What's your take on how it's all playing out?
Well, it's fascinating to see how these internal party struggles are playing out on a global stage, you know? The Republican Party is really wrestling with its identity right now, trying to figure out what it stands for. Meanwhile, you've got Biden trying to walk this tightrope between the demands of progressive Democrats and the more moderate wing of the party.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act, for sure.
It is. And then you layer on top of that inflation, which is a major pressure point for everyone, both domestically here in the U.S. and internationally.
Absolutely. And speaking of international pressure, we have to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, which is unfortunately still dragging on. And from what I've read, it doesn't sound like there are any easy solutions in sight.
No, not at all. We're essentially looking at a stalemate at this point. But the really surprising thing is how Russia's economy has managed to hold on despite all those sanctions.
Right. I was surprised by that, too, when I was reading through the report.
It is surprising, isn't it? But a lot of it comes down to their energy exports, particularly to China and India. Those have been crucial for keeping their economy afloat. However, and this is a big however, there's growing dissent against Putin within Russia. So how long can that economic stability actually last? That's the big question.
It's like the whole world is holding its breath, just waiting to see what happens next. And then on top of all of that, you have these other global power shifts happening at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, the Israel-Palestine conflict, it just seems like it's always there, simmering away in the background.
It's a deeply entrenched conflict, and it has ripple effects throughout the Middle East and beyond, unfortunately.
It does. And then you have China's economic slowdown. I mean, that's got to be making a lot of people nervous.
Absolutely. China's a major player on the world stage, so any slowdown in their economy is going to have global consequences. And it's interesting because despite those internal challenges, they are still pushing forward with their Belt and Road Initiative.
Right, that massive infrastructure project.
Exactly. It's this huge network of roads, railways, ports, all designed to connect China with the rest of the world. And the fact that they're continuing to invest in it, even as their economy slows, shows just how determined they are to remain a dominant global power, you know? Even as things are shifting internally, they're still projecting that image of strength outwards.
It makes you realize just how interconnected everything really is, you know?
Yeah.
Like what happens in China, it's not just some far-off event. It can directly affect us here. Like, look at what happened with supply chains a couple of years ago.
It's true. What happens on one side of the world can have a very real impact on the other side. And speaking of interconnectedness, let's talk about the economic roller coaster that's been 2024. Remember that inflation spike we all tried to forget about?
Oh, how could we forget?
I know, right? Well, it's still causing major headaches around the world. It's been a tough one to shake, that's for sure. And central banks around the world are really in a bind, aren't they? They're trying to get this inflation under control, which means raising interest rates. But the risk there is that it could end up slowing down economies even more, maybe even tipping us into a recession. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a tough needle to thread, for sure. And it's important to remember that we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet here, right? I mean, this is impacting real people in a very real way.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that play out with all of these strikes that have been happening.
Absolutely.
It feels like 2024 is the year of the picket line.
It really is.
Auto workers, healthcare workers, teachers, I mean, you name it. It seems like everyone is just fed up.
Well, there's definitely a sense out there, and I think it's growing, a sense of frustration and inequality, right? Like wages just haven't kept pace with the cost of living, and people are feeling that squeeze. So these strikes, they're a pretty powerful signal that something has got to change.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call, that's for sure. But speaking of change, let's talk about the tech world, because things are evolving at, like, warp speed over there.
Yeah.
I mean, Estonia is now using AI to run parts of its government.
It's encouraging.
Algorithms are making decisions. It's like we're living in a sci-fi movie.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you actually stop and think about it. And it's not just, government bureaucracy, right? We're talking about AI composing music that's topping the charts now.
It's wild.
It's amazing and a little bit unsettling too, right?
Yeah.
It really raises so many questions about the future of work, about ethics, even about creativity. I mean, what does it even mean to be creative in an age of AI? It's a fascinating and slightly unnerving thought.
Seriously. I mean, can you imagine telling someone 10 years ago that algorithms would be writing hit songs?
Right.
They'd think we were nuts. But while AI is certainly shaking things up in a lot of ways, for me at least, it's the cyber warfare stuff that feels like a whole other level of unsettling.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the dark underbelly of our increasingly digital world, isn't it? We've seen it all, right? Hospitals, banks, entire government systems, all targeted by hackers.
It's scary stuff.
It is scary. It really highlights how vulnerable we are, how vulnerable all of our digital infrastructure really is. And the thing is, it's not just about stealing data anymore, right? It's about disrupting essential services, causing chaos, sowing distrust. It's a whole new era of warfare, and we're still trying to figure out how to fight it.
It's enough to make you want to ditch your smartphone and go live off the grid.
Right.
Okay, maybe that's a bit extreme.
Slightly.
But you get the point.
Yeah.
But on a lighter note, let's shift gears and talk about something a little more uplifting. Let's talk about culture. Beyoncé and Taylor Swift, they are proving that music is alive and well in 2024. Have you seen the lines for these concerts?
It's incredible.
It's insane.
They're not just musicians, they're cultural icons.
They are.
And what I find so fascinating is how their music really transcends borders. You have people from all over the world who connect with their music, with their message, with their stories. It's a really powerful reminder of our shared humanity, I think.
It really is. It's amazing how music can do that, bring people together from all different walks of life.
It's true. And speaking of bringing people together, did you hear about the Paris Olympics this year? They went all in on sustainability.
Oh, yeah, I did read something about that.
They really set a new standard for these mega events, I think, in terms of being eco-friendly.
Well, it's about time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to see that kind of global leadership on something as important as climate change.
It is. It's definitely a sign of the times, I think. People are starting to, they're expecting more. They expect these big organizations, these big events to take responsibility for their impact on the planet.
Yeah, let's hope Paris set a precedent that others will follow.
Fingers crossed.
So we've covered a lot of ground here today. We've talked about everything from political dramas and economic uncertainty to AI composers and, what was it? Oh, yeah, cyber warfare.
The joys of 2024.
Right. It really does feel like we're living through a pretty pivotal point in history, don't you think?
I completely agree. There's this sense that everything's kind of, in flux, right? It feels like we're at a crossroads, and the decisions we make today, whether it's about climate change or AI or global conflicts, these decisions are going to have ripple effects for years, decades even to come.
It's a lot. It's a lot to wrap your head around, for sure.
It is. It is.
But that's what we're here for, right? To try and make sense of it all, at least a little bit.
Exactly. It's about connecting the dots, understanding the bigger picture, and maybe, just maybe, feeling a little more prepared for whatever comes next.
Well said. So, as we sort of look back on 2024 so far, what's your biggest takeaway from everything we've discussed? What's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from all of this?
That's a great question. For me, I think the biggest takeaway is just the sheer interconnectedness of everything we've talked about today. Like, we can't just look at the political landscape in isolation, right? Or the global economy or these technological advancements. They're all intertwined, all influencing each other, shaping each other in ways that, frankly, we're only just beginning to understand.
It's like that butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
One small change in one part of the world can have these massive ripple effects everywhere else.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this moment in time so, on the one hand, fascinating, right? But on the other hand, a little bit daunting too. Because the choices we make both individually and collectively as a global community, those choices have the potential to create massive, massive change.
It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also, when you think about it, incredibly exciting, I mean, who knows what the future holds?
Who knows? That's the beauty of it, right? But I can guarantee you one thing. It's definitely not going to be boring.
That's for sure. And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. If an AI can almost win a Nobel Prize, what else is possible in the next few years, right? What will you create? What will you change? Something to ponder. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.